kit at now.
Questions.
I think
people, certainly before the show and maybe at the beginning of the show as it started to air and then get some kind of a following at the beginning, was it's really good to laugh at things you're scared of. I think it takes away the boogeyman kind of feeling of, oh, you know, this is too frightening. This is a can of worms. I'm never going to win. I'm never going to really get to the bottom of this. So let's really not talk about it. And this show, Sensitive Skin, was reflecting some of those feelings that I was having, not about sexuality, although, of course, like everyone else, I have issues. It was really kind of reflecting my views about aging and the fear that I had about it. And the biggest fear was that am I still vital? You know, do I still have something to say? And how will I say it? I mean, aging in my generation is considered a disease, and it's a place you have to eradicate it to be okay, to be beautiful, to be interesting, to be wanted. And I that didn't sit well with me. So I wanted to open maybe a discussion at first. And then I saw this original series in England called Sensitive Skin, written by Hugo Blick, for a woman in her 60s, Joanna Lumley. And I thought, you know, this feels right for me. That's a story that I want to tell. I feel very fortunate at this point in my career to make choices and to also get things done. I mean, the biggest fulfilling aspect of Sensitive Skin is that I got it made.
It took a while. It took 10 years.
It did, ultimately.
To get this made.
Yes.
So, you know, while you can say you were fortunate and you get to make choices, at the same time, this was hard work.
It is, even for people who can make choices. It's really hard work. Because first of all, it's a woman's story. And she's not young and nubile, you know. So it's tricky. But there is a nakedness here. There is a vulnerability here. There is a character who's not self-assured. And that's what can happen, for most people does happen in middle age, is you start to wonder, who am I now? That's who I was in my 20s and my 30s and my 40s, but now in my 50s and my 60s and beyond, what have I achieved? And fortunately for me, a lot of the things on my list I have done. I've had an incredible career, and I'm very grateful for that. But these were more personal questions that kept coming. And I thought, you know, how can I understand these? And if I played a character, you know, how would I feel about her going through? So it was an exercise in understanding not just aging, but having empathy for myself and the questions that I was asking. So that to me, you know, is a real sweet spot when you're tackling a role or subject matter that is relevant right now for what you're going through, because it has the added advantage of the truth attached to it, and that's the mother lode.
I want to give people some context before we continue this part of the conversation. You made this show because you were resonating with the emotional aspects of the lead character on the British original series. So where is Davina at emotionally at this point? Season 1 ends with quite a cliffhanger.
Yes, I don't want to give too much away.
I don't want to give too much away either. I just want to give some context for our listeners.
Well, what I like to bracket this way without, you know, stepping on anybody's toe from the first episode of the second season. In the first series, we're talking about a 30-year relationship between a man and a woman. And something's going on for our protagonist, Davina Jackson, and she can't even really name it. But something's changed in the way she feels about her life, her husband, her future, her mother, her sister, her brother-in-law. All of these start to kind of just brew in her that something is amiss, but you don't really know what it is. And we use the device of delusions for characters outside of herself, which are really her talking back to herself. And again, not always saying or doing the right thing, leading her into trouble sometimes. For the second season, we wanted to really put Davina in the driver's seat of her own destiny. And she's single now. I won't explain why she's single, but she's single. So this is, we also had her move to Toronto Island so she could get a perspective, a visual perspective, and an emotional perspective of what her whole life had been. So that's really fertile ground for all kinds of conflict and, again, self-inspection and observation and contemplation of where she's going to go next and what she's going to do. There's no roadmap to this. I mean, there's all kinds of psychotherapy and religions that have a lot of answers for many people, but everyone has to listen to their own way of dealing with mortality.
I want to pick up on a couple of things that you said. First of all, earlier you were talking about vulnerability of this character. You were talking about the truth, your own truth that you bring to this role. And it makes me wonder about the decision to put yourself in that vulnerable place. You could take on some safe roles, I'd imagine, if you wanted. Why take on a role that puts you in that vulnerable place?
Because that's the scariest place to be, and you don't know how it's going to work, and you don't have any answers, but in posing the questions, it might open up a way, an idea, some kind of thread to what will lead to ultimately what I think we're all striving for, which is fulfillment. A fulfillment of not just a dream, but a day-to-day life that gives you what you need. So that to me is, I don't ultimately feel like I'm putting myself on the line. If I wasn't doing it, I would letting myself off the hook.
Interesting.
So for me, when I take on a character, there's got to be a reason at this point in my life. I turned 60 this year, you know. I've played a lot of young ingenues, and I've been the wife or the neighbor next door, and I've been the sexy, you know, vamp, and I've done all of those things that have been incredibly fun and rewarding. But now is the time for me really to use my work and to use the medium of television to speak to an audience, to entertain them foremost, to entertain them, but also to leave them maybe with some questions that they themselves can start to even think about or answer. Because I think a lot of people are unconscious, like this character is at the beginning. She doesn't know what's going on. And the only examples that we have of that in film is almost women of this age being grotesque and, you know, going through hot flashes and being a cougar and being, you know, a sexual predator, and all of these ridiculous scenarios, which are extremes. I mean, most women, that's not their reality. I mean, it certainly isn't mine. And it's I wanted something that resounded in a very clear, truthful way in telling this story, that it could cause a ripple. I think ultimately that's what I want to leave behind as a producer and as an actress, is some kind of ripple of change, that people can look at something like female sexuality and be less frightened of it. It's not gender specific. And also to play a character who doesn't have the answers, because nobody really has any answers. You know, only you can ultimately, if you're listening to that voice inside of you, which is the ultimate thing that you have, which is your instincts. And when I saw this show on British television, my instinct said, that is a story that I want to tell, because it's happening to me. And if it's happening to me, it might be happening to other people. And how can I tell that story and make it mine? That's why bringing it home to Canada is so important to me, and why Tirana is such an integral part of our series.
You brought up telling stories for people who are often unconscious, and you said Davina was unconscious as well. And you brought up these insightful delusions that act as a sort of device to help to bring her characters, bring her some clarity. I think it's such an interesting problem, looking at what's really going on in your life. It sounds like the simplest thing, but it might be the hardest thing.
Yeah.
Was that one of the things that resonated for you personally, where you actually related to the character?
Yes, that's what I wanted to tell. I wanted to tell the story like that. Not this woman is not Superwoman. she's had a nice life. She has a husband who loves her. She has a son who's really difficult to deal with, but she has a sister who's impossible. Those relationships between sisters are complicated, and the sister's husband. So we created this world, for her, and the only way that she could really accept what was going on in her head is to see, as you see in the first episode of the first season, is she's talking to herself and saying something's going on. And it's not just, a hot sweat. It's what is really going on here. I recently had a bout with insomnia, which really stopped me in my tracks. And there's really not much you can do without sleep. And I think that in smaller increments, that's what's happening for a lot of women. It's just manifesting itself slightly differently. And I think this bout for insomnia for me had to do with my immortality, coming to terms with that. These are really heavy issues.
Big questions. Yeah,
they are big questions, but I think that they're important questions. And again, to use humor in dealing with them, and irony is really a great way to access it, and to not just open a conversation, but to get the audience to understand a real woman. When people talk to me about the show, what they really love about it is it feels real. Mm-hmm. They feel that these conversations are happening in real time. We don't have a setup joke. It's a dark comedy. People pass away in this comedy. It's much more, I think, honest. I like sitcoms. I like to laugh, but I also like to think. And I think what's given us, what we've been given in the last, say, 10, 15 years, is comedy that is multi-layered. And when you get that punch from a surprise, it takes your breath away. And you just don't know where it's going to go next. That, to me, it's drama and comedy, but ultimately it's really good storytelling. And I like to tell stories. That's always been a talent that I've had and enjoyed. So to make this a story about an unseen, not just unsung, but unseen heroine, and make her as human and as vulnerable and as real as possible, is really it's a great thrill and a great gift to be able to do it. I mean, it's not an easy sell to come into a room and say, I want to do a half-hour comedy about a woman going through a midlife crisis. What?
Which is why
is she going to be naked? Does she have a lot of sex with guys? I mean, this is kind of what you're up against, and the fact that I've been able to come home and do this is really extraordinary.
It sounds like a lot of work you've been doing. You brought up your battle with insomnia that you've recently been open about. How did you come to terms with those fears around mortality?
Well, they're ongoing, aren't they? I think the biggest clue for me, I wrote an essay recently for BBC Radio 4 about my insomnia, and it had been coming on in fits and starts, and I was just so busy telling other people's stories, I wasn't really having enough time to do things for the heck of it, which I speak about in my essay. The heck of it is for no reason other than it might possibly just be fun.
Following instincts, as you said earlier.
Following instincts, but for no other purpose than just the now. Mm-hmm. Just kind of hanging out, whether you're just sitting and thinking, or just really the value of wasting time. It's not wasted doing that. And sitting there, all these ideas, the idea for the essay came to me when I just kind of stopped and enjoyed whatever was right in front of me, instead of doing things with purpose and with dedication and doing them to the best of my ability. And I've got a message, and I do.
This is like dutiful.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, you're a doer.
I'm a doer.
I'm a doer.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't come from huge big cities or rich moms and dads that says, we're going to show you the world. We've made our way, and there's a lot of people out there who have done that. And you think, okay, now I have to change the speed here a little bit. I got to tune into a different frequency of just laying back and enjoying what I've built and seeing which mountains are worth climbing now. The house that I bought on Vancouver Island is a huge symbol in the positive side of the heck of it. I wake up and I hear the sea lions, rah, 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 and the eagles are, flying by, and life it feels like this cycle, right? I was born in Liverpool, England, and I grew up on Vancouver Island, very poor, and my walks on the beach were everything to me. The logs on the beach and playing in those logs and having bonfires at night. And I was really happy. I really enjoyed it. I had a great childhood. And then I discovered that I enjoyed acting. And then it took me on this amazing odyssey. And now I've sort of come home in a way. Not full time, but enough for me to feel that I'm reconnecting to something that is such an integral part of who I was and who I am.
Sounds like an amazing stage of life. I mean, we were talking about all the questions and all the challenges, but it sounds like an amazing stage of life.
I know, but so many people are fear-based about it, you know, because the fear, I think, the greatest fear is that you will be alone. The greatest fear that we all have is that we will be alone. And, you know, there's different ways of being alone. You can be alone in a forest, but there's a lot of stuff going on around you, so you're not completely alone.
There's also a kind of essential loneliness that I don't think you can ever get rid of. That's not necessarily bad.
No, I've spent a lot of time. I think what it is you can be alone, and it can be terrifying. And you can be alone and accept it and let go. And what comes, and I'm still learning, as again, I'm a doer, is when you let go, there's something else that you get, which is a tremendous breath of comfort and looking around and appreciating what you do have instead of what you think you need.
Well, I could talk to you for a lot longer, but unfortunately we gotta wrap up.
Thanks so
Thank
much.
you. Kim Cattrall is the star and executive producer of Sensitive Skin. The second season premieres this Sunday on HBO Canada, and Kim Cattrall joined me right here in Studio Q. Now, when Q continues, they can make 10 times as much money playing in Russia. So is it any surprise that WNBA players are flocking to Moscow? Coming up on the Sports Culture panel, the league turns 20 this year. We'll look at why the Russians treat female basketball players like the stars that they are. I'm Shad, and Q is back in a few.
Support for WHYY comes from Everence Financial. For over 70 years, Everence has helped individuals, businesses, and organizations bring together their financial well-being with their faith values. Services include financial planning, investments, insurance, and charitable giving. Everence is committed to making a difference in the lives of its clients and the community. Learn more at everence.com/Souderton. Advisory services and securities offered through Pro Equities Incorporated, member FINRA and SIPC.
Why would you eat nothing but beige paste for the rest of your life?
How did the Stanley Cup end up in a ditch?
And how did we trick professional curmudgeon Mark Maron into answering etiquette questions?
Wait a minute, what is this show?
The geniuses, I'm Rico Galliano.
I'm Brendan Francis Noonan. All these questions answered, plus wire walker Philippe Petit, this week on the Dinner Party Download.
The show that helps you win your dinner party.
Coming up next on WHYY.
Hey, I'm Shad, and this is Q on CBC Radio 1, Sirius XM 169, and from PRI, Public Radio International. Bryce Harper is one of the best players in baseball. He hits massive home runs, he has an amazing glove, but he's also a...
The Dinner Party Download is supported by Progressive Insurance, working to make progress for more than 75 years.
This is an encore broadcast of an episode that first aired in May 2014.
Welcome back to the Dinner Party Download, the arts and leisure section of Public Radio. I'm Rico Galliano.
I'm Brendan Francis Noonan. In a few minutes, we chat with Philippe Petit, the man who in 1974 walked between the Twin Towers on a wire. He's written a new book.
Yeah, slightly easier feat.
A little bit. But first, it's time for the main course, the part of the show where we talk about food.
Indeed. And Brendan, it is rare that a food substance makes headlines online and in major magazines.
Like the KFC Double Down.
Exactly.
That's sexy cover story.
Sure, but this is almost the opposite kind of food. This week, a product called Soylent captured people's imaginations. It's a powder and an oil that you mix with water, and its supporters say you can live on that and some additional water for weeks and weeks at a time.
Is the first ingredient snake oil, by any chance?
It's apparently not. In a New Yorker article this week, the creator says Soylent has been 90% of his diet for a year and a half. So we asked the company's business VP, David Rentellen, to bring some to our studio. But first, I had to ask him about the name Soylent, which, of course, most folks associate with the 70s sci-fi film Soylent Green.
Yeah, so in the movie with Charlton Heston, Soylent was made of people, but our product actually contains absolutely no people.
I'm happy to hear it. Tell me what is in this stuff. What are the ingredients?
There are a lot of ingredients. The largest percentage is oat flour, maltodextrin, canola oil, rice protein.
First of all, who came up with those particular ingredients and in whatever proportion you have them in?
It took a lot of product iteration. Rob, our CEO, came up with the original formula, and he lived on it for 30 days. And so that's sort of where this all began.
Sure, but I mean, where did he come up with it? I mean, did he just kind of test out every possible combination of nutritional supplement until he came up with one he could live off?
So there are a lot of studies that show what ideal nutrient proportions are. Part of what Rob did initially was sift through all of these studies and come up with the closest consensus to what would be most healthy, which we then confirmed with our medical advisor, Dr. P. Sun-Yang, who's the head of human nutrition at Columbia.
So you get this stuff, it's a powder and an oil, and you mix those with a certain ratio of water.
Yes.
And that is the proportion that everyone gets. It seems to me that everybody has different nutritional needs. Some people are iron deficient, some people want to eat, just naturally will eat a little more of something because the body kind of demands it. Is this really a one-size-fits-all substance?
It's as close as one-size-fits-all can get. As far as, iron deficiency or wanting to eat more, it has a ton of iron in it from added vitamins as well as natural iron in the rice protein. And as far as eating more, you can always mix up another bag of Soylent. It's 1 calorie per milliliter. One of our co-founders, John, is 6'8", and so he needs about 3,500 calories per day, sometimes when he's very active. So,
are there side effects? I had read somewhere that there was, gas was an issue for some people.
That can be an issue for some people, and it was especially an issue in early iterations of the product when high quantities of sulfur were involved, and that was quickly addressed.
I can imagine. That's what beta testing is for.
It is. That was a bug in the product.
How many times a day do you... Well, let me ask you, how many times a day do you drink? Are you subsisting on this entirely?
Not entirely. It takes up the bulk of my meals. I do breakfast and I do lunch pretty much every day, especially weekdays. I find it very easy to wake up in the morning, mix up a pitcher of Soylent. I don't have to worry about what's for lunch or what I'm going to get. I don't have to leave my desk if I don't want to. It's a problem that's just solved.
But I guess that's what gets me, is this idea of stopping to eat food as a problem that needs to be solved. I understand that sometimes it's enough, but there's now, like your CEO, there's a whole subculture of people who are now want to subsist on this for long periods of time. That, I don't know why, but it feels worrisome to me. It seems like, I think about the movie Brazil, where they're at a fine restaurant and everybody's ordering variations on this kind of lifeless paste. It's almost like the definition of a totalitarian society. Is the goal here really to kind of eradicate the need for food?
We've heard that concern before, and it's not so much as us wanting to replace food as much as wanting to replace a staple meal and make food more convenient. Then you can replace meals that you don't enjoy. I don't know what that might be for you.
Oh, there's no meals I don't enjoy, unfortunately.
Well, for me, junk food is something that I try to get away from, and I find Soylent is very useful in helping me avoid that. But I still very much enjoy going out to, a nice restaurant where there's a dish that is almost more of an art than a meal that I would need to subsist.
You mentioned, trying to get away from junk food, something that'll satisfy you instead of junk food. Is it satisfying?
Yes, absolutely. Incredibly satisfying.
Even though it doesn't have any chew to it? I know that we did an interview recently with a guy who did a certain kind of cleanse, and he found that after a week he was really yearning to chew something.
We have heard that some people do miss the urge to chew, and we recommend that they chew gum. But we don't recommend that you chew and consume unhealthy calories just to satisfy a sort of mechanical urge.
All right, let me taste some of this.
Sure, okay. So we brought you some here. It's in a 2-liter pitcher here.
And it's kind of beige.
It is beige, and we purposely designed it to be very neutral. Both.
Colored, you mean?
More for taste and texture. If this is something that you're going to have for a large percentage of your meals, you would get tired of something that has a very extreme texture or taste.
So it's going to be somewhat bland, I guess you mean by neutral.
Yes, but I prefer delicious than neutral. And an advantage there is that you can customize it by blending it up with berries or peanut butter, and everybody has their own sort of take on that.
Okay. Although when you start doing that, you're kind of missing the point, it seems like.
Well, since it's so amenable to customization in terms of taste, you wouldn't actually have to blend very many berries, for instance. So the nutrition really wouldn't change very much.
All right. And initially smelling it, it smells a little bit like protein powders that I've, had after a workout or something like that.
Sure.
Okay. Here we go. It is very neutral. It's not unpleasant at all. It has a kind of graininess on my tongue. Kind of the consistency of watery cake batter. So the flavors may be a little muddy. I can imagine, drinking a lot of this, but do you know people that have lived on this entirely other than your CEO?
Yeah, a number of our customers have ordered large amounts and stated what's their intention to live on it for long periods of time.
What kind of people are they? Who, in your experience, wants to just eradicate the pleasures of food from their life forever?
So we have a very powerful community, and we have people who are chained to their desk some days and can't get away or don't want to for the sake of efficiency. We have other people who really want to use this for something like a camping experience, for instance. Then you can see how it actually be very energetically efficient to carry a lot of powder with you.
True, although you cannot roast this over a campfire, alas. Brendan, we should note there are many questions about subsisting on Soylent, like, for instance...
I bet.
Yes. Like, for instance, there are some compounds in food which the body doesn't necessarily need to function and which aren't in Soylent, but those compounds may help ward off diseases in the long run, so the jury's out.
Also, it's beige paste.
It's a tasty beige paste, in fairness.
It's time for Chattering Class. This is the part of the show where an expert schools us on a dinner party-worthy topic. Today our subject is creativity, and our expert is French high-wire artist Philippe Petit. In 1974, he walked into the history books via a wire strung between the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center. That feat became the subject of the Academy Award-winning documentary Man on Wire. Philippe continues to do wire walking around the world, and he has written several books, the latest of which comes out next week. It's called Creativity, The Perfect Crime. It's a book about the creative process. Philippe, for a man whose art requires such precision, you spend an awful lot of time talking about chaos in this book, and that seems kind of counterintuitive.
If you welcome chaos, chaos is going to organize itself for you in front of your own eyes.
How is that so?
Well, try it. Embark upon a project and welcome all the ideas from the outside and from the inside. You'll get a beautiful, chaotic mess in front of you. And then give it some time. Time will organize it. And of course, you will be an accomplice in that organization. So I always welcome chaos, knowing it will come with a little bit of help from me to a nice ordained structure.
Chaos, which you point out is the Greek word for chasm, or a wide open mouth.
Yes. Since I am a Frenchman, I always refer to the senses and the taste, and the culinary tongue is always there lurking in the shadow. So yes, the taste of, the mouth wide open, engulfing all the knowledge that the world has to offer, chewing all this information and then spitting out the essence. Yes, that's very French of ours.
You actually use that metaphor in another part of the book. After the kind of chaos and as it starts to take shape, you spend some time talking about some of the threats to kind of creativity, and you talk about how lethargy lurks.
I love you to pick that up, because yes, lethargy is a green tongue monster really lurking. And
yes, that's right.
You have. I'm not talking about body language only. I'm talking about also the profound spirit of things. It's so easy for an artist, or just for the art of living artist, to fall into the complicated system where things works and serve you. Well, that's where the danger lurks. You should be on the edge of your seat every day of your life. You should be surprising yourself. You should be learning a few rules to be able to break the rules. And my book is it's an invitation to do all that.
So I can imagine some listeners thinking, okay, invite chaos, buck the system. This sounds well and good, but this is coming from a guy who scaled the World Trade Center and walked across it on a wire. You are an extraordinary person. How do you know these principles will work for other people? I mean, what do you think about nature versus nurture when it comes to creativity?
I have a very strong thought about that. I do not believe at all in a pre-made system. I don't believe that you're born with 10 amazing fingers that will lead you to be the best violinist in the world. I believe that as long as you have those 10 fingers ready to serve you, passion should be your motto. And let's take the example of the violin. If you're passionate about the violin, what are you going to do? You're going to use your 10 fingers in manipulating this more marvelous instrument day and night, and you are going to forget to sleep and to eat and to rest, and therefore you're going to do it all day long. And if you play the violin all day long, you are going to become the best violinist in the world. We all have that passion dormant in us, but many of us had forgotten that. So maybe my book will help in opening doors, saying, look, you have that passion in you, awaken it and run for your dreams and erase the word